StreamYard's up.
All right, welcome. My name is Jerry Capizzuto of GodIsLoveTruthLife.com or GodIsLoveTruthFreedom.com because a life without freedom is not a life worth living. And today I have my two amazing returning guests, Dr. Dustin Plattner and Curt. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us. Thanks,
Of
Jerry.
course. And Dustin, do you want to plug your websites?
Sure. Yeah. I do activist work about natural law and objective morality. My website is freeasabove.xyz. You can find my content there. And then I run a private practice, working with children and families, drdustinplattner.com. And as a psychologist, as a therapist, working with families. And then I created a computer movement where you can become digitally sovereign, and that's sovereignsystems.com. So there you go.
Nice. All right. Today's topic is going to be the self-defense principle, which is something and just various ways that one can apply it. And I invited you both because this is an area that I struggle in personally. I definitely am skewed more right-brained, and I have exercised that principle. But yeah, just love to hear everyone's thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, it's great.
Would you like to start or would you like me to?
Curt, you go ahead. Yeah, hear your thoughts on it.
Okay. In terms of the self-defense principle, for anyone who's not tracking, there's sort of diametrically opposed principles regarding freedom. It's the self-defense principle and the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle is to never go into action against a peaceful being. The self-defense principle is essentially just the inverse. If someone is attempting to coerce you through force, you always have the right to defend yourself from that coercion. Now, the problem we frequently run into is, well, things have been normalized now where people aren't even aware of where their own boundaries are and have been taught to see it as selfish to stand up for their own boundaries. And this starts all the way back in our school system, right? I mean, the number of men I can tell you, myself included, who've had experiences where someone's like throwing rocks at the playground, at them on the playground when they're like 4 or 5 years old. So they go punch that kid in the mouth. Well, then they're dragged away to the teacher's or the principal's office and made to sit until their parents show up. And to think about this when you're 4 years old, because these adults, they're more than twice your height, right? They're this looming authority figure towering over you, telling you that you're wrong and that you have no right to defend yourself.
Right.
It doesn't matter what someone else did to you. Don't you ever think about protecting yourself from them. And that's burned into your head when you're still, when you're still only a small child. So a lot of people have a lot of this they need to get over. And that even goes beyond things like actual physical violence. Like when you have teachers or parents trying to force a kid to share or play nice on the playground, well, what you're actually telling that child is that their boundaries don't matter. It doesn't matter when you want. Other people want to be involved and you're not allowed to exclude them. Well, you've just destroyed that child's agency. So it's not even just you're not allowed to defend yourself, it becomes you're not allowed to have your own opinion if it offends others. And we're teaching that to our children from a very early age. It's incredibly destructive. You like to add anything?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good observation. The core of it is not understanding what is a wrong behavior versus what is a right behavior. And parents don't really get that concept, so they don't translate it to their children. So that's really the big issue. So if you can get a child to fundamentally know what the difference between a right behavior and a wrong behavior are, then the child can take the appropriate action. So yes, so in it, say that the playground scenario, like you were saying, Curt, um, that process where if there was a rock thrown at the child and the child was being innocent, another child threw a rock, well then yes, if the child knew the difference between the right and wrong, they would then say, that's wrong. I was doing something, I wasn't doing anything, and they actually hurt me. So that child then can go and push back. And that child would know those differences because of their parenting. And that should be honored then in the school system. But on the typical, what happens is, well, it doesn't matter who started it. There's that language gets propagated a lot
Yeah.
with the administration and things like that, where that's actually a falsehood. It does matter who starts it. And it's unfortunate that the schooling systems are the way they are. And then one of the awfulnesses of them are this dynamic we're talking about, where if kids learn the morality differences of what a wrong behavior versus a right behavior, then that could be easily more discerned, and the child could have a better upbringing. And then going back to your point, Curt, is then they would be able to understand and practice the divine masculine principle, the protection principle. They would begin to practice it at a young age. And on the flip side, they'd also be practicing the divine feminine, non-aggression, right? They'd be practicing that. So it would be a balance, and they would start learning that in their early education environment. But we're so far from that, as you were saying, Curt, and that's the issue. So this is why we need to educate.
Well, and with how the school system presently is, if they learned that objective morality side of what other people don't have the right to do to them, they might start asking a lot of questions about how their teachers treat them as well. And we can't be
Correct.
Right.
having that happen, can we?
Yeah.
Right. Because
Yep.
then
Yeah.
the whole the whole system would be put into question.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
the moment you start breaking down these systems that exist around you to their fundamental basis of what they are, you basically realize everything around you is BS. The whole political system, the whole. Can't remember who the quote is first associated with, but it was that the culture you're in is the cult you're in. That's why it's cult you're. And that's. Even these things like, well, it's just normal to buy someone a birthday gift on their birthday. Well, why? Who is that actually making profit for? And why do you believe that that's normal? Because someone put that there. And I have nothing against something like gift giving, but in the same way, sharing is a wonderful thing, but when you start forcing to someone else to share under duress, the duress has changed the entire concept. The moment you
Right.
start making something like gift giving or charity an expectation, you've actually destroyed the concept. It isn't what it was previously. Those are things
Right.
that can't ever be enforced, or you've destroyed them.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely systems. The system is in place where it it bleeds into this authoritarian authority sort of worldview that we've been grown up in all around the world, and
Yeah.
that's what begins to erode at the divine masculine and protecting oneself. Um, it's sort of insidious because if you believe that there's authority, then that means your divine masculine, your the protective principle gets put into the background. And that's the sinister psychology of that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of already knew this, but in like hearing you both talk, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I was like abused a lot as a child, and so of course in adulthood, even with the shadow work that I've done, like just yeah, just starting from scratch in a way, learning
Yeah.
and exercising this principle in my life. Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah. And oh, go ahead,
that's
Curt.
also that's also been a large part of the push for over for a couple decades now, most of my life, this idea of toxic masculinity. Any traditionally masculine behavior gets brought up, oh, it's toxic masculinity. And
Mm,
really, it's a desire to almost completely destroy masculinity in general,
right.
in large part because of that divine masculine aspect that will stand up for itself. Because if you have yourself in contact with that, every single time someone imposes on you, you're going to be thinking, hold on, what right do you have to tell me what I may or may not do, what I may or may not own? You demand that they justify it to you. Um, and
Mhm.
that's what they absolutely don't want right now. Every time they try to pass a new oppressive piece of legislation, a new mandate, a new order, as is coming up right in front of us right now, whether
Yep.
it's going to be mpox or bird flu or whatever, they absolutely cannot tolerate anyone asking the question. So they have to make it shameful that you would ever present yourself in a way where you're being traditionally masculine, so that it can be written off on just that front. When a man's getting up and being angry and saying, "No, who the hell do you have the think you are having the right to dictate to us? Oh, he's just a toxic male. He's just hateful. He hates the system. He doesn't want to work together peacefully." No, that isn't what it is. He just knows that you don't have the right to dictate to him. Sorry, Dustin.
No, that's yeah, the kind of adding to this idea that all of us have the divine masculine and divine feminine principle in us, and it all needs to be in balance. Um, you, but those cannot be exercised unless you have a foundation of what right and wrong are,
Right.
what a behavior that harms versus what a behavior that doesn't harm, and the knowledge of what is violence versus what is force. So, as you make that truthful clarity that there is a right and wrong, and there is a difference between force and violence, um, and we can explain all that now. It's in a lot of my videos, it's in a lot of Mark Passio's videos, even on Jerry's podcast. We've talked about this before. So if you're new to this information, go learn. Go learn that information. I'm using these terms very distinctly and specifically. So you have to have that foundation first. Then you know how to be in your divine masculine and divine feminine. And then this idea where someone then says, I have authority over you, or this law is authority, or whatever it might be, then you can clearly, instantly know that's wrong. It's evil. And then the next step is to how do I navigate through that space where I don't get involved with that nonsense.
Right.
So hopefully that's made sense to add to what you were saying, Curt.
Oh, it made perfect sense.
Okay.
Well, this segues really well into just like practical solutions in terms of exercising my self-defense principle in my life. There's violence in, government, and I'm not participating. I'm not going to be paying taxes. I left my life in another state and did not register my vehicle or what have you in this other state that I'm in, and I just cut off everything cold turkey. So that's one method. But in our pre-conversation, we talked a little bit about how one can go, navigate through man's law. So what are people's thoughts on that subject?
Well, can I add in,
Yeah.
Jerry, real quick, too? Yes, I want to get into that, but I want to add into this piece of we can only grow as beings on this planet, men and women on this planet. We can only really grow if we're in love. Love makes us grow. But here's the thing, though. Love can only blossom if we're being generous and kind and loving, let others live as how they see fit. That's the divine feminine. And the divine masculine, when love is under attack, by violence, not by force, by violence, then we have to use our self-defense principle, the divine masculine principle, to push that away. It's the boundary to push away. As there's pushing for safety, the divine masculine creates safety, the divine feminine creates flourishing and nourishment. Those two balances have to be going together for love to grow in us. And once love is growing in us, then we're evolving as a species. So those have to be in balance. So in what we were kind of thinking in this podcast and what Jerry wanted to do in her idea is talk about this divine masculine aspect. We can get the love part, but how do we then navigate in this world, in the 3D world? How do we navigate by using the self-defense principle or growing our divine masculine? How do we do that? So I wanted to add that sort of chunk in
Now,
there.
before we continue then, may I ask what your definition of love is?
God, the all
Agape.
source.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pure. It's pure God. It's source. I mean, that's love.
Well, keep in mind, there are people who are going to hear that sentence, and when they hear the word love, they're going to be thinking purely like romantic
Got it.
Hollywood
Yes.
love,
There's
right?
arrows.
Like, you've got to
Yeah.
be really
Yeah.
careful, because
Well,
Right
we
on.
can tell.
someone who
Yeah.
doesn't know this is going to hear that and hear a completely different message because of the different definition on that one word, right?
Yeah, it's a
Right.
very
We're
good
talking
point.
about within the individual, the divine
Right.
masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
I more
Yeah.
or less knew what he meant, but again, that's
Yeah,
not
sure.
that's not everyone's understanding of that word.
No, that's right.
Good point.
That's right. So yeah, and love is also truth, capital T, truth. Love is that. It's God, it's source. It's above. Yes, folks talk a lot about the different layers and what love can mean in different contexts, but I'm talking about the ultimate love for evolution, creation, and the creator. That's love.
Agape.
Yeah, agape. Yeah.
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 So yeah, I guess. Are we ready to jump into
Sure, yeah,
legal?
yeah.
And obviously, none of us are giving any legal advice today. We're just
Well, and
opening doors. Yeah.
it depends on what level we are talking about it, right? Because there's the exercising the self-defense principle when dealing with government and authorities, as you were just saying about giving people legal advice. There's exercising the self-defense principle in terms of, like, if I was going to get groceries and I get attacked walking down the street and I defend myself. Then you start to get into somewhat more esoteric self-defense principles where, say you have a really controlling, unpleasant family member who keeps making assumptions about what you should be doing for them in your spare time. At what point are you using the self-defense principle by saying, like, no, I don't owe you anything, I don't have to help you with that. Like, you've been nothing but rude to me, kick rocks. Yeah, it's not using physical force, but you're still recognizing your boundaries and standing up for yourself. There's different sort of gradations to it depending on what the kind of intrusion is.
Correct.
And obviously they all require different responses.
Correct.
But
Yeah,
with
self-defense is on a range.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with the government, because of how much belief there is from the masses backing it up, they have a lot of free rein to use a lot of force against you, and you need to go into any interaction
Violence.
aware of that. Violence, yes. But that's... I mean, we were just looking at Larkin Rose's book, Most Dangerous Superstition, and he was giving... One of the examples he gave was Ruby Ridge in there, where it was a government agent, an undercover police officer, sold this man a shotgun that's barrel was allegedly 1/4 of an inch shorter than regulation. That was the only thing they actually had any kind of warrant to go looking for on his property. and they shot his son in the back, they shot his wife in the head while she was holding their infant daughter, I believe,
His
after
dog.
keeping. Right.
Yeah.
All based on a weapon that they sold them in an act of entrapment to begin with. And most people have never heard of that event. And a lot of the people who have will still often tell you that, well, they should have just complied, they should have. Like, people are so brainwashed by the system that often they'll stand by and cheer for the man while he's got his boot on your face. So you've got to go into those situations knowing that.
Right.
You don't want to have more interaction with that system than you absolutely can avoid. At least that's my stance on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely on a range self-defense and the level of violence that is done to somebody. I like how you broke that up, Curt, on the different sort of levels and what you have to, how to think about this. And this is just exercising divine masculine. So when there's violence coming your way, how in whatever certain circumstances, how do you navigate that space to bring safety back? And in all of these dynamics, using the divine masculine, the self-defense principle, make sure you are in the right. Make sure you have not caused any harm. Harm meaning you harm a sentient being. Make sure you are your hands are clean. This is the fundamental point of divine masculine.
Right.
If you've harmed someone, I take responsibility for my actions. So if I've harmed somebody, then I have to make it right. If I'm innocent and someone then does violence to me, then it's my right then to take the action of force to stop the violence. Then I am in the right and they are not. So
Now,
everything moving forward, we have to be in the right.
there's an important topic we need to go over there then, because there's been a lot of work in the last 1 or 2 decades to get people to conflate offense with violence. As in, I've said something that you find offensive and therefore I've harmed you. Think about how
Yes.
many times people have been taken to court over having offended someone now. And they're trying to pass more and more laws, anti-hate bills, and whatever else. So the fact
Censorship.
we think you may have offended someone, now we're going to use very real violence on you if you don't do as we say from here on out. And it's very important for people to understand what is real harm and what isn't. And part of that is that no one else has control over your feelings. They have control over their actions. They don't have control about how you feel about their actions. You can do one thing and have 1,000 onlookers all view it in a different way. Like,
Right.
I could be out at my grandparents' farm shooting skeets over the cornfield, facing away from the road, obviously not firing over it like a friggin' lunatic, but someone could be driving down that road and turn out to see me and my dad's backs as we're looking out over the cornfield. And then someone driving down that road might think we're a bunch of dangerous, violent rednecks who are gun freaks. Another person might be driving down that same road and say, I haven't done that in a while. I should call up my son and see if he's available tomorrow afternoon. You can't control what other people's perspective of you is going to be. You can do things to adjust that a little within your spectrum of understanding of psychology, but ultimately you don't get to control other people's perception of you. So trying to claim that you've caused someone tangible harm because of how they felt it's a very obvious excuse to justify violence that's going on everywhere right now, and it is an important sticking point that people get hung up on.
Well, one thing to practically sort of mitigate that a lot is, in reality, if you're done harm, meaning property was stolen,
Yeah.
you have 7 things that are your property, and we've talked about them. So if you're property, so let's list the 7 things. I'm going to get to my point. But so
Yep.
much, it's, we can say something, but you need to have a foundation of what we're saying so you can get it. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of prerequisite knowledge to understand what we're talking about. So if you just jump in on this, folks
Sure.
that don't know us or watching this, you're not going to fully understand what I'm saying. So, let's go back just to fill in to help. It's very important for me when I teach that people have the understanding of the foundation before it. So,
Yes.
property. So if property's stolen from you, that's harm. Okay? Now, and I'm going to get to my point, but let's go back what property is. So it's your life, your bodily and emotional integrity, and that's the point I'm going to talk about. Your sexual choice, your possessions, your peaceful domicile, a fully informed decision, your free will choice, and I think that's it. So
You
those
got
7
all.
things. Yes, those 7 things. Okay, that's your property. If someone is trying to take that away and you don't want to, that's violence. Okay, we talked about this before. So if someone's doing violence to you, they're harming you, they're taking your property. Cool. Now, if someone, as Curt was saying, if someone goes in and says, your words are offending me, and they get really, really intense about it, and we're going to sue and whatever, okay, all right. That, lawyers love that because it's not really, they don't really care who's going to win or lose there. They just want your signature because they're getting money off of your bond. So is the judge. And we can talk about that. So that's just a silly system. No one cares. They could give 2 shits about who wins or not. Okay.
You swore
So,
for the first time ever.
and so that's a system that'll get people lost. But here's a way to mitigate this. If you are harmed, there's a thing called an affidavit where you write up on a piece of paper, you write up all the points in which you were harmed physically that are provable. Your property was taken from you by someone else. With an affidavit, then you sign it, and then you have to get it notarized that you're signing under oath. And if you're lying, if you're found out you're lying, then you go to jail. That's what you're signing in that affidavit. So you're risking your freedom to
Wow.
state your truth.
Damn.
So if someone actually is harmed by someone else, what you'd want to move it into is, okay, I need an affidavit from you. You need to serve it, officially serve it to me. So there's a legal record that I've been served, and I need to have your signature on it, and then it's under penalties of perjury that you will go to jail if you're lying. Then usually the person has 90 days to rebut the affidavit. That's the process of living men and women, how you go back and forth if there's actually harm. So that's a
Crazy.
way to mitigate that process when someone's opening their mouth and saying, you've harmed me emotionally. One more point. So there's that packet. One more point. In the property that I've talked about, your bodily, your life, your bodily integrity, and your emotional integrity, I want to go there that's actually your property as well. So someone who's being abused, emotionally abused, you're no good. You're a liar. You're the worst. Why are you so stupid? Why are you so
Nice.
lazy? Over and over and over. That's emotional abuse, and that's breaking natural law. So I want to add that piece in there, but I can see how in the modern day, and especially how the dark occult and the dark occult lawyer systems and legal systems and how the media is making this so big. Like if you, like in UK, if you post a thing against the government, they're making this huge
It's
thing about it.
frustrating.
I can see how they're trying to conflate those to get people confused, but the affidavit process is a way to mitigate that, to put your money where, put your freedom where your mouth is, really is the idea.
Also, going back to your point, Kurt, like I was thinking about an incident in my life as a parent where my 1-year-old smacked my 5-year-old, and my 5-year-old smacked him back pretty fucking hard. And he's like, but he started it. You taught me this. I did the right thing. And I said, well, you did, but the amount of force you used to his violence was not proportional. So I had to explain, like, the amount of harm or hurt you felt.
Proportionality. Well, and that kind of segues back into what Dustin was saying about the emotional violence side of things. Because I would agree it is out of line to be constantly berating and belittling someone, but that also doesn't mean that the answer is lawfare, right? Um, like, if someone's constantly saying harmful and negative things to you, cut them out of your life. There's
Yeah, of
other
course. Yes.
there's
Yes.
other avenues of pursuing that to defend yourself from it that don't involve dragging someone to court.
Oh
That's
yeah,
that
I didn't
whole
mean that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's that
Yeah,
whole
I wasn't meaning
spectrum
that. Uh-huh.
that whole spectrum of methods of self-defense based on the kind of
Correct.
aggression you're experiencing. And
Correct.
that's what I was trying to get at earlier was that they've been trying to teach people that something offending you is something you should be dragging someone to a court to either have their property taken from them by force or have them locked in a cage by force, which are both far, far more egregious
Violent.
violations of natural
Yeah.
law. Like, there's nothing proportional about that. Um,
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's correct. The level of navigation and what you apply, that's correct. So obviously, if you're in a relationship or with a friendship or in a group and you're getting emotionally abused that way, yeah, you set appropriate boundaries and you say, see you later, even in a relationship. That's a caveat to that too, adding to this the cycle of abuse. If you study that in psychology, a lot of people get caught up in the cycle of abuse. And that is where you have to then, yes, that's where you have to then say, enough is enough. And you have to use your divine masculine, your self-protection to move away, to get out of that relationship, whatever it means. So yeah, that's a process. Obviously, you don't go to court for that. That's just way too much energy. But
Yeah.
right, so that's that piece. I was something else in my mind, but yeah, I wanted to add to that.
well, if it comes back to you, feel free to jump in.
Sure. Yeah.
Can we talk about rescission? Can we bring
Yeah.
that up now? Yeah. What is rescission? How does one use it?
So this is in particular now the levels of self-defense. Oh, here's the sorry, Jerry, here it came to my mind. The self-defense principle. Now, obviously, if one is an adult and they're on the street and you're getting attacked by a thug or whatever, you may not know what's going to happen. So if you see clearly that your life is in danger or your bodily integrity is in danger, you might have to amp it up really quick to put down the threat because you do not know what's going to happen in a street
Right.
fight. You know, you can get clocked in the head and you hit your head hits the ground and you're dead. Or you don't
So-
know if they're going to go ahead.
I actually, one of my CQC instructors in the Army had that exact thing happen to him. He was outside a bar in a nearby town, and some guy sucker punched him in the back of the head. And this guy was a Golden Glove boxer and just turned around and knocked the guy out on the spot. The guy he knocked out falls backward, hits his head on the back curb, disconnects his spine, is dead almost instantly. And then, because of that, he ended up getting demoted and basically had his whole career destroyed, even though he was eventually found not guilty. It took years to go through the court. It's that whole, the process is the punishment. Even though he was defending himself, having to go through the whole court system, not being eligible for promotion the whole time, and having been demoted in the first place, he set his career back like 10 years just for standing up for himself.
Yeah, so that whole that's a mess. I'm going to focus in on this one part for your
Yeah,
life
sorry.
to protect your life. No, that's all right. For your life, you don't know what's going to happen. So you're going to have to trust the universe and love in that connection. You might have to do, and you got to do whatever you do to stop the violence. As long as you know you're innocent, you do whatever you do to stop the violence. And all the court stuff, you worry about that later. That's silly anyways, but you have to make sure because yes, you're divine masculine, you need to stop the violence. So in some instances, yes, proportionality is important, the amount of violence to the amount of force, but there are some instances where you might just have to overpower the situation to shut it down. Just to give every listening folks that common sense idea as well. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, there are...
Oh, what do you say, Curt?
There are going to be a lot of people who listen to this who've never even been in a fist fight. That's just the way things are these days. But a lot of people don't fully understand how lethal a fist fight can really be.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, talk to guys who've worked as bouncers about that. They see it all the time where someone will grab a bottle and take a swing at someone with it. Because they've seen it in the movies and things, but they don't really have in their head an idea properly of what that can do to someone.
Yep.
And with that, like you're saying about having to escalate things, well, if you get attacked by someone on the street, you have no guarantee about what they're going to do to you after they've knocked you out. You don't know if you're going to wake up in a trunk somewhere. You don't know whether they're just going to stomp on your head until you die. You don't know what they're going to do to you once they get to that spot. So it's not a violation to escalate to whatever point you need to get them to stop, since they started the violence. Like, if someone is trying to stab you and you pull out a gun, you've technically escalated the amount of violence in the situation. Correct. Well, the amount of force in that. But that's...
Correct.
But no. Your life was already in danger. If that's what it takes to stop them, that's what it takes. It's a different... that is an important, different angle to it. But that's... People get messed up with that because they don't even... Well, it was just a fist fight. No, it wasn't just a fist fight.
Correct.
That was potentially death for that guy.
Correct.
That's not...
Correct.
There was a... And then the way people try to misrepresent these things after the fact, too, that's part of why courts are such a joke. There's a recent viral video that's been going around where some guy had his liquor store had a gang of kids he kicked out of it, and then when he's at the door entrance trying to tell them to leave his shop, they all start trying to beat him, and he retreats backwards into his store and pulls out a gun and points it at them.
I think I saw this,
and after that they all scramble, but one of the kids involved is riding away still filming himself for TikTok going like, man, guy pulled out a gun over kids on bikes. Like, no, he didn't pull out a gun over kids on bikes. He pulled out a gun over 12 people trying to beat him in his shop. That's what he pulled out a gun over. But you always be very careful when people are trying to give you their side of the story, because they're almost never representing it properly either, right?
Yeah, so with the divine masculine principle, I mean, there's some practical things that one can do, right? Maybe learn some martial arts. That's probably really important. Take some time for that. Learn how to use a firearm. That's really important. And if you can carry, and if you can open carry or concealed carry in the States, do that. These are all important things. Again, you have to be in the position that you harm none, but you will use force if there's violence. That's the key. And once you're in that position, then you're in love, you're in the all, you're good. And so, but those are some practical things on sort of how to navigate that space. Try to get as much exercise as you can, try to eat healthy. These are things that really help you stay fit and that you can protect yourself. Now, if you're getting older and you can't do that, well, then you have to maybe think about some ways in which you can work on your divine masculine. You might have to, you can still carry a firearm when you're 80, and that's an equalizer. That's a wonderful equalizer to the situation. So those things are some practical steps with like thugs and like straight violence. Now, going back to governments and how to use your divine masculine with governments, because all governments are based in violence. That is the capital T truth. There is not governments are not good. That's a misnomer. They are not good. They are evil because they're based in violence. Anything that uses violence is evil. Therefore, government uses violence, so government's evil. So, what you'd want to do, there's one idea to understand how governments work, is that everything works as in a contract system, where, again, this is for educational purposes. You have to do your own, just years of work of understanding how this works, okay? So,
You spent like 4 years, right?
yeah, this is years to understand this. So you have to do your own work. And because most people don't want to take responsibility for their actions, like, come on, take responsibility for your actions. I'm just trying to help you out with this and help you think. You're responsible for your own stupid decisions. So, okay. So all governments they work in a contract system. This is what I've come to know. And all governments know natural law. They know they can't harm anybody. They know can't directly do it because they know the karma that comes their way. So it has to be done in a voluntary state. You have to give up your position, so then they take over. You give it up, they take it over. You give it up, they take it over. So, simply just not giving it up, then they can't take over. I'll stop there, but I'll get into that rescission word. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I wanted to add something to that on your point about governments knowing natural law. I almost think this is something Mark should know if he ever does a redo of the occult mockery of the police and military, or if he does like a part 2 of it. But at least in Canadian basic training, and I'd love to find out if this is true for American as well, there's certain classes that you cannot miss for any reason, or you're essentially taken off the course and they'll find another course that's starting the same week and put you on it to make sure you get that class. You can. So a lot of Canadian basic training, there's, a few hours of exercise a day, but most of it's PowerPoint hell. Most of it's you sitting in a classroom just getting lectured to all day. And one of those lectures, they're going through law in terms of like law and warfare and like political prisoners and prisoners of war and all of that. But while they're going through that, they take the time to tell you very specifically there is no point where you are not solely responsible for your behavior. If you are ever given an order that is causing a moral crisis, it is your obligation to disobey that order. That, almost word for word, that is what is told to you in basic training. So every single person they send overseas to murder for them has been told by them to their face, by the way, you are the one responsible for everything you choose to do here, not us.
That's brilliant.
They absolutely make that point to you. They don't want you to ever exercise it, but they make the point.
And right there, so the dark occult systems that created the military and the police, right? They know natural law, and they just let everyone know if you do this, you're morally capable. So they just got rid of their karma.
Yeah.
So again, the dark occult know, the police, military, they know natural law, and they know they cannot break it. Because
be clear, when we're saying the dark occult / the police military, we're talking about the people who designed that system. The 80 IQ thug you meet in the squad car at the side of the road, or wearing the army uniform who's like a private holding a rifle. They don't get that. That's
Correct.
not for them. So
Correct.
just for people hearing this, to keep that separation in their head.
Yes.
The people at the bottom tier of these organizations don't have that knowledge. That's for the
Correct.
people who run it.
Correct. Yes.
That's why
So
it's so important we, yeah, just keep repeating ourselves about this deocculted information because it's being manipulated against us. Yeah.
Yep, correct. So now I'm going to rephrase a little bit. Um, Anyone can break natural law. It's just you can't escape the consequences. So the dark occult, not light occult, but the dark occult powers, folks that are in power that should not be in power, they've created these systems, and they know that if they take the action of breaking natural law, there's going to be huge karmic consequences coming their way. So they created this military police system so they get other people to do it for them. And as you were saying, Curt, that is exactly correct. You have to so they basically got a full disclosure, which is great. So going back to this point is they know that every one of us is a nation. You know, Jerry, you're a nation. Curt, you're a nation. I'm a nation. It's my responsibility to have my defense for my nation, the flourishing of my nation, me as an individual. I'm my own nation, just like Russia or China or whatever. We're our own divine nation. And then I have the responsibility to who I do business with. It's my choice. There is no nation above me. It's me and everyone else. So we have to understand that point. So once we have that point understood, then we have to navigate to this idea then everything has to be done by contract, by voluntary agreeing to the process. And if that's the case, then, then any sort of movement from a government is an action to contract with myself. It's an offer. I'm looking to, they're looking to offer with me. And then I have to say if I want to do it or not, because they're not above me. They're the same. They're even lower, but I'm even more because I'm an individual. They're a group of people that get together, but you can't create an entity out of that. But
Right.
anyways, so I'm above them, so I can say if I want to navigate with them or not. So that's the first sort of pillar to understand. Any questions, you guys, or what are your thoughts on
yeah,
that?
yeah. Well,
No, I'm more or less tracking the concept. I've never heard it described as someone being a nation, but I get your point with describing it that way.
Yeah.
There's not really anything you said there I disagree with.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a better. I haven't heard anyone say that on the internet either. That we're our own nation. I think it's just better to say it that way so folks can get an idea of like, oh, they get that concept, right?
Yeah, I like it. I just hadn't heard it before.
Yeah. So we're our own nation, okay? And the only way we can navigate in this world without negative karmic consequences is by voluntary association, by connecting with each other voluntarily. And usually that's a contract form. Sometimes it's a verbal, you shake your hand, I agree, cool. Or sometimes it's written down and you both sign it, or a group of people sign it, and then you're in the contract together, right? So, yes, so that's how that process navigates. So now if you have that understanding, now anytime someone comes to you, or a group of people come to you, i.e. governments, it's always an offer to voluntarily connect or not. Even though there might be violence in it, it doesn't matter. It's an offer to contract. Okay? So, if there's violence in the language, then you're even more money because now they've broken natural law and you did not, right? But here's the key. Usually if you get something from the government, it is because you are in a contract with them somewhere along your timeline. So you have to understand how you volunteered into that contract so you can get out of it. Okay?
Are you hearing a delay of some kind?
I'm hearing an echo too.
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know where that's coming from. Strange.
Okay.
I'm maybe reduce my background noise. Okay, try now. Maybe that'll work.
Testing, testing. Is it delayed still?
Weird.
He's fine on my
Yeah,
end.
let's just keep
Might just be a
going.
little
Yeah,
bit of a latency issue.
Yeah.
I did want to point out on that, you reminded me when you described it as an understanding, how much language gets used to trick people in this.
Yep.
Even, like, if I asked you a question and then said, "Do you understand?" or read off a statement and then asked, "Do you understand?" Almost everyone who listens to this podcast, when they hear that question, they're going to hear the question, "Do you know what the words I said meant?" That's what they're
Mm-hmm.
going to think that sentence means. If you go
Mm-hmm.
pull out a
right.
if you go pull out a legal dictionary, that is one of the definitions of the word understand. If you go the next word down to the word understanding, an understanding is a form of a contract, formal or informal. It can be verbal. So, if a police officer pulls you over and then reads you off a statement and says, "Do you understand?" the moment you say yes to that, whether or not you were previously considered under that cop's jurisdiction, you are now because you just signed a verbal contract with that cop, creating a contract putting you under their jurisdiction.
Correct.
You
Yep.
never say
Wow,
you
you guys.
understand. You
Yeah,
never
so
say you understand.
I'm looking on this online etymology dictionary. It's from an Old English understanding, to comprehend, but also to view in a certain way, stand in the midst of.
Yep.
So I was going from the word understanding in Black's Law.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was going off of it from. Because you have to understand the way people use language in the normal world and how it's used legally are not only very different, the words almost sometimes mean complete opposites to each other. That's
Yep.
Right.
that's why you need a formalized education before you're considered competent to speak in a court. Because it might sound like English words, it is a different language, and you need to know
Sure.
that before you get involved in it.
Yep. Correct.
Well, and
And then
that's
also, oh, go
that
ahead.
I just want to highlight the sheer absurdity of people believing in that system based on that. Like, if
Correct.
you need years and years of specialized education before you can read and properly interpret these rules that have been written for you to follow, and then they have hundreds of thousands of these rules that would take you a lifetime to read, how can any normal man or woman who's trying to actually earn a living for themselves and be a decent human being ever do that? They can't. And
Mm-hmm.
it's designed that way on purpose. It's an impossible task. They're asking
Mm-hmm.
you to comply with rules that they're openly stating you're incapable of understanding.
Yep. That's right. So the key is to never get put into their process or their whole venues, not to get involved in that. That's the key to understand it. Um, stand under. Understand means stand under, right? So it means you subjugated your authority to them, your sovereignty to them, right? Um, so if you are in contract, then you have to know how to get out of that contract. And how I like to say it is, you can never give over your sovereignty ever. Even if you sign something with another organization, you can never give it over. Um, they might think that now that you are in that position, but in reality, you cannot. So that means that you can always recall your power back, right? You can always get it back, and then claim it in the now moment, because really only what exists is the now moment. The past is gone. That doesn't exist anymore. The now moment does. So you can move your position and reclaim it and to end it. So this idea of rescission is in contract law. Contract law and equity go hand in hand. There's like maritime law, there's common law, and then there's equity. Equity is the supreme being of it all. And basically it's saying you are in honor, you stay in honor, I stay in honor, and then you just highlight the folks that aren't in honor, and the ones that are not in honor, they lose, the ones that are in honor win. So you have to come with clean hands. There's maxims of equity. You have to come with clean hands. So you're never in controversy, you're never you're never fighting or being belligerent. You're not doing any of that. You're just saying, I want to make it right. I want to resolve the issue. And in that stance, you're saying, then you're calling back your sovereignty. You're saying, this is over. I'm in what the work that I've done, I've said this is over now. It's done with, and the contract is ended. I've called back my sovereignty and ended it. And that has worked for me in some of these various things that I've done. And that would be in that rescission process. So the key is in your divine masculine to be really acute and zoomed in on this. As we know, government's violence. Well, then the key is for all of us on this planet is to move out of government contracts, to clean our hands of that and move forward. And then you take your time then to figure out what contracts you signed in the past, and then in the present moment you rescind them. There's various ways of doing that, and then you move forward and don't get involved in their systems ever again. So that's sort of a general overview. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I kind of jumped around a little bit, but any thoughts on that?
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that's trying to force people into those contracts is a large part of the brainwashing we're exposed to when we're young, as
Correct.
well as a lot of the agendas that are being pushed out right now. Wanting people to need government ID to get on public transit, wanting people to have government ID to get a bank account. All of these things are to try to force you to get these contracts so you can be controlled, right?
Correct. They're involved in
That's-
everything. In your house, government's involved. They have made themselves involved because of the culture that we're in. So they're involved in our bank accounts. They're involved in the places we live. They're involved in our travel. They're involved in our finances. They're involved in our schooling. Any endeavor of human life on this planet, the government's involved. That is a slave system. Their hands are in everything, and they're the most convenient, straight. They are like the number one brand on how to navigate in life. You got to go through the government, and that's culture. And if you think about it, no one ever came to your door from the government and said, you need to pay taxes, here's what you need to do. No one ever did
Right.
that.
Sure.
You did it because your parents told you to do it, or or the grandparents, or your friends, right? It was
Well-
culture that put that into your system.
And
Right.
more frequently, you did it when you applied for your job and they just started deducting without actually having the conversation with you.
Correct. And in
Like-
businesses, when you incorporate with a business, then you got to follow the government rules. So that's why when you incorporate or come an S corp or an LLC or all that shit, the thing is they contract with the government, because I can only start a business because that's the only way to start a business. LLC and your business license. So then
Right.
you're an arm of the government, and then you're going to give government paper to everybody, and that's how they do it. That's how the government does. The group of people get together. That's how they do it. That's how they spread their net.
I have like this feeling of nausea rising in me as you describe this. Yes, it's horrible.
It just makes me laugh. I constantly you're talking to these people because I keep my ear fairly close to the ground on various political groups in both Europe and North America and all over, just because I like following what's being said in all these places. And they talk about how we're being walked towards global communism. And all I can ever think to myself is, you're already in it. It's becoming more tyrannical, but you've been in it since you were born.
Correct.
Like, the amount of tyrannical control the government was exerting over everything may have increased, but ultimately, you've been a slave from the moment you were born. That and your parents were, and your grandparents were. It's not that people talk about the New World Order They forget that if there's going to be a new world order, there had to be an old world order.
Right.
That's the only. So you're already part of the old world order. It's the same thing. It's just a slightly revised edition. That's all. Other than that, like, what you. God, we were getting into this. I think we got into it on the book club chat a little, where I brought up that, like, if half of your income is taken as taxes, well, you go down the road to a business, say you want to buy groceries at the local farmer's market. Well, that you already had half of what you earned taken. Now you spend it on that farmer. If half of what you gave to him gets taken as his income tax, now only a quarter of what you originally earned is still in the system. 75%'s gone to the government. That farmer tries to spend what he's earned. Again, whoever he's spending it on, they have to pay their income tax. Half of it goes away again, an eighth, a 16th, a 32nd. By the time you're 12 or 13 steps down the road, less than 1% of the original value earned is still in the economy. The rest's all been siphoned back off to the government. The moment you add any percentage of income tax, it's not actually a 10, 20, even 50% tax. It's a 100% tax. Most people just aren't capable of recognizing that.
Yeah. True talk.
Yes. Jerry, what are your thoughts? No, that's all right. Jerry, were you going to say something too?
I just wanted to hear, because you and I chatted a little bit about like your successes in your rescission process. Do you mind sharing a couple ways that you've exercised this in your life?
Yeah. One thing is, again, the understanding is there's a contract that I signed, and then I realized it doesn't work for me, and I realized that I made that by mistake because I was unaware. I still signed it, so it's still my action to do so, but then I realized I need to take responsibility. I made that my mistake, and I need to end it. That's the process of rescission. Your signature gets you into it, and your signature gets you out of it. Okay? That's really important to understand. Your signature makes it happen, and then your signature closes it, because you're a nation, you're a divine being. When you write something down, you create it into the world. In your sovereignty, when you're not giving away your responsibility, in your sovereignty, you are creating something new, and you can erroneously give it away, but then again, you can always call it back with your signature. That's the power of the signature. Your autograph is really how it's said in the living. In your autograph creates, right? So in this rescission process, one thing is that I don't get involved with governments at all, so I don't have any contracts with them. So therefore, if I'm parking, again, no government can own any land, by the way. That's an entity. No entity, only a living man or woman can have property. No entity can really have property. Okay? So governments don't own any property, even though they say they do. They don't own it. They don't own the streets. They don't own anything. They're not even a real thing. So if they claim ownership or whatever, that's all just mind control babble. So if I'm parking somewhere and I didn't harm anyone, there's no harm done, there's not blocking anything, it was a legitimate place, a way that was safe, and then a government entity comes in and says, we own this land, we have these rules, here's a ticket, so here's all the laws in the ticket. Well, that's a contract. That's a contract, and they're offering, hey, do you want a contract with me or not? Now, if you don't, here's some violence that we'll do to you. We're going to do to you my name that's on that name. We're going to do this to you. It's all make-believe. It's literally monopoly money. Just think about it that way. So it's a contract. Yeah. So therefore, like what I just said, I say, no, thank you. I'm not in that contract. And you use the word rescission. If you want more details, you can talk to me in private, but you use the word rescission and then you send it off and the contract is over because I never was in your venue. Now, they might press you a few times. They got to do at least 3 times. Dark entities love doing things 3 times. They want to test you. And literally, I've heard from Kyle Washington, Empower Movement on the NOL, the Notice of Liability. He has a whole system to do stuff. And he said in his work that when he goes up in like government buildings and stuff like that, if he had to ever go into stuff, you don't even have to go into their buildings, but if you go in, like sometimes he'll talk to people in their organization. He'll say it once and they'll be like, no. They'll say it twice. They'll be like, no. They'll say it once. He'll say no. They'll say it again. He'll say no in a fancy way. They'll say it a 3rd time. He'll say no. And then all of a sudden their countenance changes and they're like a different person. So Kyle Washington was sort of alluding to that. These people get, I think, infiltrated by dark entities, and they're trying to test you to see if you're sovereign or not. And they usually do it in 3 times. So,
that's a common concept
go ahead.
in exorcism also. Yeah, keep going.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you will be pressed on. I get pressed on, but I stand my ground. I know I've harmed none. I know my position because that's taken all my studies, and I've taken responsibility for my actions. And then eventually, it just sort of goes away. They'll never cry uncle. They'll never say, "Oh no, you're right. I'm so sorry." They'll never do any of that. It'll just sort of just disappear. So that's how that process works. But again, it's the whole foundational concept of what I talked about. You got to know the difference between right and wrong. You have to be in right living. You have to know equity means you come with clean hands. You have to know that you've done nothing wrong. And then you have to understand that everything's a contract and everything's a presentment or an offer. That's the navigation. So when you do your research, I suggest that you do for many years and understand this point, because as you go out on a limb, you're the one responsible for everything that you do. You're your own nation. No one's coming to save you. You don't have like an alliance. It's just you navigating your space. Okay?
Love it.
Well, and with that, in terms of no one coming to help you, that would include things like bankruptcy law wouldn't apply.
Correct. That's all their system.
If I rear-end Dustin in traffic and he has a spinal injury and needs support for the rest of his life, I can't get out of paying that by declaring bankruptcy.
Correct.
Because I was acting in private as me. I had the entire bankruptcy system is someone getting paid out based on the social security accounts that were created in your name by the government. If you're not acknowledging any contract existing between yourself and the government, none of that exists. So there's no way of sort of shielding yourself from those responsibilities. That's
correct.
It's crucial that people understand that freedom is not an absence of consequence, it's the acceptance of consequence.
Yeah, I like that. Yep.
They're so inextricably linked, they might as well be synonyms. There's no getting around it. And
yeah, you're right on, brother. Right on.
Keep going.
So, and that's sort of, again, looking at all the political turmoil in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of conversations about certain states looking at potentially seceding from the rest of the U.S. and other things like that. And what people need to understand is the most important secession is you looking in the mirror at yourself and saying, I secede from this system.
Yeah.
It doesn't represent me. I never consented to it. Whatever I thought I was involved in it, I'm not. Because all of these policies and systems were put in place before you were born. You never had a say in it. You never, like, even when you get people like, oh, the Constitution says, the Constitution was written how many years ago?
Yeah.
When did you agree to it? Is your signature on the paper? Then what right does anyone have to bind you to it?
Yes. And the thing is, though, I exactly right on, but they get you really is when you sign up for, like when you do a W-2 for a work, or when you if your Social Security needs to be renewed or something like that, and you sign it. So whatever sort of presentments you get through your development, and you're signing their government paperwork, then yes, you have consented into it.
Oh, I
Now
know.
the good news is you can always rescind it out of it once you understand what you've done, and you've done it by mistake, because you're not fighting with them, because you did it. Take responsibility. You owned it. So
Yeah.
oh, my mistake. I need to get out of that. I don't want to be involved in your system anymore.
Love it. I'm remembering, so my podcasting kind of schedule has blown up in a good way. But I'm remembering also why I reached out to you both initially is because at the time, going back to this idea of like government infiltrating every aspect of one's life, I was traveling and I didn't want to go through the body scanner for, during the TSA check-in, and the options I was given is you're either going to go through this carcinogenic body scanner or we're going to have to do a pat down. And they were asking for my consent, and I completely fucking regretted saying, well, I guess we'll do the body pat down, because I didn't actually want that. And I was like, I called Dustin. I was like, what the fuck should I have said? So anyways, do you want to go into what I should have said at that time, Dustin?
Well, here's what I do. This gets me. Woo!
It fucking sucked.
Okay.
Sucked.
So this is what I do.
Pat
So
down in front of everybody.
correct. Oh no, I know. It's violence. It sucks because it's violence. That's the problem. Okay, so they give you two. First of all, they label you. You're an opt out. They call you an opt out. Don't label
did.
me. By the way, I want to cuss. Don't
They
label me.
yelled it. They're like, she's an opt out.
Yeah, don't ever label me. First of all, number one. So I say, I'm not that. I just don't want to go through that. I'm not that. I don't, that's unhealthy for me. The reason why, because it's not safe for me. I don't want to go through it. Well, then you got to do this other thing, the pat down. I say, I don't want to do that either, but you're going to prevent me from getting on my flight if I don't. So if you must do it, you do it. But I'm only doing it because I'm under duress. So that's what I say to them. And then what do you mean under duress? I'm under duress because I can't go to my flight. If not, then you're going to lay hands on me and pull me out of here. I've done it like 4 times. I said I'm under duress, and then eventually they do it. And I just one guy just stared in the eye as he was doing it. He was so nervous because he knew he was wrong. And then they eventually let me go. And I wear my government and slavery shirt too. I wear that so they're seeing it right as they're doing it. I wear it on purposely, and then I hand out Passios.
Every time I fly.
Yeah, and then I hand out Passios cards at the end. I was like, "Here, why don't you hear some cards so you can learn what you're doing is wrong?" And I handed it to one guy, and he's like, "Oh, so he's like, if I look at that card, it'll show what I'm doing. Something like I'm doing is wrong or is bad." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly. That's why you need to look at this card." And then I say, "What you're doing is immoral, by the way," and then I leave. But I always say I'm under duress. So if you're if you're getting pressed on by an order follower, you do everything you can to stay out of their contract. This is another topic where you ask questions instead of answer questions. You want to go into that realm, and that's a technique you have to learn. And then if violence keeps getting pressed and pressed and pressed, then you say, does your record reflect that I'm under duress? Does your record reflect that I'm under duress? If you must, but I hope your record reflects that I'm under duress. Does your record reflect that I need to get to my flight? You're just that's a question form. You're putting it back on them. You do your best to navigate that space, and then you move forward. Because at the most, you just tag their soul with natural law. Now the karmic consequences are going to hammer them in their spiritual nature. They're done for. And the least, you might get some... maybe them to maybe not do it, I don't know, but at least you're pushing back on the system in general. But at the most, you tag them spiritually, and good luck, because natural law is at your back now. Don't ever touch me when I've harmed none, correct? And don't ever label me.
Ugh. Yeah, dude. I also, it was actually like a really illuminating experience because like I saw that like in the whole like traumatizer roles we were thrust in, she didn't actually want to pat me down.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I sent her just a loving, warm energy as she was doing it because I was just like, I know this is really hard for you too. We both don't want to be here doing this to each other. Or
Yeah,
she doing it to me, to be frank. But I just saw her pain too.
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
I
she's
mean,
still taking the money.
correct. Yes. So that's very divine feminine of you, Jerry, and I hear that. That's wonderful, divine feminine. But I don't go that route. They're making the choice,
Yeah,
and
Sure.
that's what Curt was saying. They're making
I,
the choice to take that. So
Right.
they deal the full force
This is why I need to
of
talk to you guys
nature.
about this shit.
it,
Yeah, it's
and
hard for me.
I'm not condoning anyone do anything,
That's
but
correct.
since I got out of the military and have been looking into things, any sympathy I've ever had for anyone wearing a uniform is dissolved. Um, and that
Yes.
includes during the height of COVID in like 2021, when there were protests about the injection mandates, um, and they had like peaceful people having picnics in Australia at a war memorial, and the police come in shooting like sandbag rounds at them with shotguns and stuff and chase them
Horrible.
off of it. Um, but then later, videos are coming out where, there's a cluster of like five or six cops talking together, and one of them's on a motorcycle, and someone just walks up behind the guy, and they had just an empty water bottle, I guess. Just, one of the normal Dasani or whatever clear plastic pieces of crap they get you to drink poison out of. But I guess he had it full of something else because these cops are talking, and you just see in the background this guy walk behind him, and it must have been either kerosene or gasoline, but just lights the cop on fire and takes off down the road. So this guy's stumbling off of his motorcycle trying to get the flames out. Just
Whoa.
pours it and lights him with a Bic and goes. And, well, what did you think you were putting out at the world when you were shooting people who were having a picnic?
Correct.
What did you
Correct.
think was coming back at you
Correct.
guys?
Instant karma. That's why. Yeah. Yeah. This is if more of us, all of us on this planet, took the divine masculine position in this, that they've made the choice. Now, again, it's one position to say, okay, I know that I'm doing wrong and I need to stop. And if they stop, like I've said in my Are You a Criminal series, that's much respect. You're doing great for humanity, like you, Curt. You stopped. Awesome. If you hear this and you continue on, that is the issue. And then all of us then need to take the divine. We take the divine feminine for a little bit. They hear it and then they move on. Then we're good. If they don't, then we step up heavily with divine masculine. And if all of us, like I said, take that in this life, we would be free, because we don't take enough divine masculine in this
Well,
area.
and a point I made on, I think the first episode I did with Jerry was that it doesn't even need to be all of us, man. Like,
Sure.
I brought up that,
In the
like, here in
beginning.
Canada, well, here in Canada, there's 72,000 cops total.
Yes.
There's 72,000 cops and 40 million people.
Yes.
5% of the population is 2 million people. Even if those 72,000 cops were working 24/7 with no breaks, no time to see their family, no eating, no sleep, they'd still be outnumbered 28 to 1.
Yes.
It, a fraction of the population having the stones to stand up for themselves, and it becomes unenforceable.
Correct.
It's
Yeah, and
True
this is
facts.
why we're not. Yeah, again, to do overt force is probably not prudent, because you'll get tanked so quick because their system's so heavy. But this is why we're educating people. This is why we do the message of education.
the thing about that, though. When you say tanks, I'm assuming you mean the vehicle, like military might coming down.
Well, I mean,
Right.
just they'll use more violence to stop you if
Right.
you do. Yeah.
The point I wanted to make there, though,
Okay.
is if we're going back to my example I just gave, with the 5% and the 72, we also only have about 50,000 total military.
Hmm.
So all of them
Wow.
together is still only about 110,000 or 120,000. They're
Yes.
still outnumbered 15 to 1. But with that, people don't realize how much maintenance all that damn equipment takes.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Mm.
like, I think the modern Abrams, you drive it for one day, it needs like 15 hours of maintenance or something. It's stupid.
What's an
Oh,
Abram?
wow.
The
Sorry.
main battle tank used by the
Oh,
U.S.
the
right
tank.
now.
Okay.
I see.
Um, Part of that is because they were stupid enough to put a jet engine in it, but that's a whole nother conversation. But
Okay.
with that, like, all of this stuff requires so much maintenance. If you had
Mm.
people standing up for themselves, combined with at least a partial general labor strike, um, that again it becomes unenforceable. They're driving the tank down the road and it breaks down, and none of the local diesel mechanics are willing to come help them fix it. Well,
Yeah.
what do you do
Yep.
now? We had
Yep.
that problem during the Ottawa convoy in 22 here, where a big part of the reason that it lasted for 3 weeks before they brought the thugs in to beat everyone was they kept trying to talk to local tow truck drivers to see if they could get them on board for the police to do a crackdown and them to come in and start towing the trucks away while the people were forced out, and none of the tow truck driving companies would willingly do it.
Nice.
So that's what took them so, or at least one of the things that took them so long. There's a
Hmm.
lot of peaceful resistance on that side where it doesn't even need to get physical, um,
Hmm.
because they're so dependent on the people's labor to hold up their system.
Correct. Yeah. So this is why we change hearts and minds. Well, that's our goal, is to change hearts and minds. So then the action by the individual is stopped. And that's what's
Right.
important. And that's why this is our divine feminine, is teaching and educating. This is why we're here. It's our divine feminine, because we care. And then yes,
Yeah.
if it does get acute, then you have to stand up with your divine masculine, by using force, not violence, because you're not harming anyone. That's the
Right.
key.
Um, we talked a little bit in the pre-conversation and going into again more practical solutions in embodying the divine masculine principle. So I do eventually want to learn how to use firearms. And you mentioned a good website, or like, yeah, like what are some, how do how does one start this process? How did you start?
Okay. Especially being in the States, it's a lot easier for you than it is for other people.
Right.
Especially, um, well, depending where you live, I suppose some states are more tyrannical than others. But with that, ideally, if you have friends who already shoot, that's a good place to start,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
they can take you to a range, they can give you some basic safe handling instruction on things like how to simply unload and check that a firearm is clear so that you know it's safe to handle, just the basic sort of workup stuff. They can they can give you, a couple rounds in a magazine so you can have 2 or 3 shots just to see how it feels. And you can kind of sort of baby step your way into that. Um, you don't have to kind of do it all at once, and you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars buying a firearm before you know what you actually want, right?
Mm,
Correct. Yeah. And there's probably a lot of good firearm training courses out there that you can
right.
take. There's all kinds of stuff, even up to like tactical training, like civilian tactical training courses you can take, which is
I
really
want to take
cool.
that.
Yeah. Uh huh. But yeah, I mean, the key is to live in a country where when you have a firearm, violence isn't done to you, and
Right.
the landmass known as United States of America, and some of these states, when you have a firearm, no violence is done to you, and that's where it is the most freedom you can actually be in. And that's the reason why a lot of why the whole COVIDs and everything happened all over the world, but didn't happen much really sensationally in the U.S. compared to the rest of the world, because we have firearms, and they
Yeah,
weren't going to dare touch us, and that
right.
is the equalizer. So move to a place where violence is not done to you if you're carrying a firearm. That's number one. Then learn how to use it well, and learn how to take responsibility, and then and then use have the right tools where you need them, because everyone has the right to defend themselves against violence. It's not that hard, and it's not evil, it's not bad, it's not scary. It's just that's truth. That's just the way it is, and that's how you feel safe. Because that you're exercising your right, your
Now,
God-given right.
I would like to add that in terms of practicing, it's not just practicing your accuracy and your ability to shoot it. You should be taking emptied magazines and practicing things like your reloading drills so that when you're actually having to
Mm.
do it under stress, it's second nature and you don't have to think
Whoa.
about it. You don't want to be
It's
thinking about those things in the moment. You want it to be body memory at that point.
correct.
Um, and
So,
so if
like,
you have a firearm that automatically locks to the rear when it's got an empty magazine, you can use something like a washer or a coin to depress that magazine a little so it won't activate. And that'll allow you to practice doing your mag change and rack and things without having the bolt catch on you, if that makes sense.
it
It
That
might
doesn't
to
makes
yet, but I'm
Dustin, to
sure
you,
will
it might be a little.
eventually.
um,
Will eventually make sense.
yeah.
I'll have to rewatch this episode once I take a course or
Well,
something.
sort of
Or
like even with
I
Mark's
have no
class,
friends
how he
with guns
says
right now.
you have to practice these things, right? You have to
Yeah.
practice stripping and then putting back together your firearm. You have to practice load and unload. You have to practice the basic steps of just handling it, not just the shooting portion. Uh,
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, in general, whether it's the divine masculine or feminine aspects of ourselves, like I feel like yeah, just learning and doing these sorts of things, like learning how to use a gun, learning martial arts, like physically going through that is like so helpful to, yeah, understand mentally the concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And then another point too, if you're using your divine feminine in the wrong moment, you've lost. You
I'm
have to
hearing
develop
you.
you have to develop your inner psychopath. It's called, Mark keeps talking about having the psychopath.
I
So this,
know.
when you're dealing with people that have chosen and continue to choose, they will not stop. So that's the,
Right.
you have to be able to like put lead in heads and then go eat lunch.
well, and
So
I love that.
there's been a significant social engineering push for that again, though, where I mean, you're expected to want to think about how you're making everyone else feel, and you should care about the other people around you in society. But the
Mm,
moment you start saying, like, hold on, no, is this good for me? Well, no, you're selfish. Why are you so selfish? It's the
right. That's
same,
social
like,
engineering.
people repeat that don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country crap as if it's something noble. And like, no, 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 hold on. I haven't been taking my country's money every day of my life. They've been taking from me. What the hell are they doing to justify what they've done to me? Like,
Mm,
you have to have in that moment that sort of like, no, 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 who the hell are you? Why do you think you have the right to impose? And you have to have those boundaries. And people have been taught to not have any boundaries. They've also been taught to expect things from others that they have no right to expect.
mm.
So I had this where I told you about my dad, who's a former prison guard, right? Um,
Yeah.
and the last time I
In your
tried to talk
interview.
to him, he said to me, "Well, Curt, like, I don't know how to talk to you because it's like walking on needles. I say something innocuous and you get angry." It's like, no, it's not that you said something innocuous, it's that you're so deluded about where people's rights start and stop, you don't know when you're saying something ridiculously evil or not.
Wow.
It's not that I'm out of line, it's that you don't know where the boundaries are.
Right.
Um, so understand that that's the kind of people you're dealing with as well, right? Where they'll be doing something to you, and in their head, no, it's perfectly justified. Why are you even questioning it? Like, what do you mean I don't have the right to pull you over?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
um, so there's there's a whole lot of brainwashing you're pushing back against, and that's
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and the reason it goes always back to the fundamentals, because people don't know the difference between right and wrong. What is a right behavior and what is a wrong behavior? They don't know the difference, and from that, since the foundation is built on sand, everything else will fall. So you have to go back and build your foundation on titanium and diamonds. And that's where you understand the difference between right and wrong. And then from there, you can take right action in the world. Again, this is all, we're not harming anyone. We're just showing you how to understand the foundation of right and wrong, and then how to defend it, how to make it grow, the divine feminine, which is not this podcast. And then we're talking about the divine masculine, how to defend it. And in that, that actually creates order. That creates peace. That creates evolution. What we're in now creates disorder and chaos and evil. Governments, police, military. We are stuck in a gross garbage can of just evil. This
Yep.
is the thing. And so we're trying to help people understand this is not it. If you let go of these systems, this mind control, then we can be in a system of love and peace and organization. We're not talking about not being organized. We're just talking about getting rid of the dense evil that's right in front of all of our faces.
So dense. Yeah. Heavy. Um, I am listening to the practical solutions we brought up today, and I'm thinking like we need to like physically organize into like militias, like local militias,
Mhm.
like the way
Yeah.
they did in the,
now
American Revolution. Yeah.
I I was just gonna say I agree with you. Um, I know in Canada you have to be really careful with that word because even back when I was like 15, 16, so over a decade now, um, if you had like a paintball team and they were called like the something militia, you'd have the RCMP showing up at your front door asking you questions. Don't you dare
Fuck.
call yourselves a militia for any
Wow.
reason. Um, I know you're not the same way
That's
down in
why
the
we're on the
States,
right
but
track
like
then.
that's
Yeah.
We're on the right
um,
track because that's their biggest fear, right?
well, but even like I was saying to you in the podcast we did together at the start, like if people got together with their local church group and just got together and said, who thinks it's BS that they're raiding farmers for selling organic food and raw milk and things, and then get not one person but like 20, 30 people to all go to the local dairy farmers on a Saturday afternoon and say like, hey, we're this local church group, we're willing to sign an affidavit saying we're not holding you responsible if you sell this to us. Like we're not going to try and say what you sold us got us sick and sue you. We're not going to um, pursue you in any way, and we'd like to create this business in exchange with you. And part of that being, if the police show up to harass you for doing business with us, we'll drop everything we're doing and come up and confront the police. Not necessarily violently, but it's a lot harder to make an arrest when the person's surrounded by 20 other people.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
But if you started just whatever thing it is that someone cares about, whether it's the fluoride in the water, the pesticides being sprayed on everything, if they got active about that and actually started disobeying the rules when the rules are BS, again, this all becomes unenforceable. And it
Right.
doesn't have to start with any march in the street. It just starts with you doing things you know are right.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Mm-hmm.
that's you just start doing things that you know are right, even if a rule says you're not allowed to. And on its
Yeah.
own, if people started doing that, it would encourage other people to start doing the same, and it would become completely unenforceable quickly.
Well, yeah, that's the community getting together and doing that correct as the more numbers push back with force on that violence. And then the other part, like I talked about, is just simply getting out of their contract. So if the
Yes.
farmers and everything, they've rescinded everything, they're creating a membership. That's one way of doing it, a membership. And it's just outside of that jurisdiction. Then they have no place to come in and give their rules. So that's another layer of protection. Plus having the community come around, if that does happen, that's another layer of protection. That's divine masculine, right? Those dynamics will help communities. And everything starts in a local community, and then it can scale. Communities can scale all over the world. So it's not that complicated.
Um, yeah, going back to this idea of like, um, finding local communities or militias or whatever, like I would love to, yeah, just find people like you, Kurt, in my community that have military training. Teach me that military
Yeah.
training so that I can, you know what I mean, really learn to truly defend myself, physically.
I was trying to get involved with some groups around here that I thought had some chance more during COVID, and I ended up getting very discouraged with them.
Mm.
I'd be willing to look at doing that again. A few months ago, I took a look at it got brought back up to me. Max Egan at one point had been talking about a website called Freedom Cells, which is
Hmm.
essentially that you
Yeah,
uh,
I,
you
Nice.
you make an
I've gotten
account,
involved.
and then
Hmm.
you can leave marks for like where you are on the map and offer to meet up with other people in your area and
Cool.
start forming communities.
Yeah.
Um, but from what I saw, there was no one in my area involved in that system. I was the only spot on the map within any
Ah,
kind of reasonable distance of me, so that didn't
yeah,
help me much.
For
yeah.
now.
That's where I started. Got my freedom friends here. It started with freedom cells. So
Cool.
that's where it branched off. So yeah, I forgot about that actually, as you just brought that up. I think it was Derek Bros who started the Freedom
It
Cell Network. I think,
might be, but the network's
or
still
John
up. The
Bush.
the
Yeah.
website's
Mm,
still there, so
yep.
if people start hearing about it again and it becomes more active, that'd
Yep.
be wonderful.
Yep. And then also to look into whatever you think about the NRA or not. I mean, they lobby with government to try to help more gun laws come through, or whatever. However, um, if they do have training courses that, well, how to use firearms and stuff, so you want to go to the NRA's website, and then you can look here in America, and so you can look through the things, and they might have, because you can become a certified NRA instructor, and then they give you education how to use a firearm and all that stuff, and I think they have different levels and stuff like that. So that's another resource.
You also mentioned a ammo supply warehouse, something
Yeah. So
in our pre-conversation. Yeah.
yeah. So Ammo Supply Warehouse is a good website if you want to get gear for firearm gear, and it's a way to sort of. I mean, you have to take responsibility when you go to that website. You got to sign an affidavit. I mean, you listeners, it's your responsibility. So you do what you need to do. But I'm just saying it's a resource that's out there. It's public. Their website's public. And you go through a sort of affidavit process, and then you can get products that you need. And I think they only serve in the U.S. I don't think in the United States of America, not the U.S., that's a corporation. But in the landmass known as the United States of America, they distribute to those states. So that's something you can look into if you like. That's another resource as well.
Yeah, I was in my previous podcast episode, I was speaking to someone, a Truth and Freedom podcaster in Germany, and I was like, y'all need to like 3D print some guns or something. Like, yeah.
Yep.
That's harder than you might think, right?
Mm,
3D printing, you can do that with the plastic components, but you're not going to print the actual barrel. You might be able to use a piece of pipe for that. There's things you could do, but that's as far as the parts that are going to be under significant force, the 3D printer's likely not going to be able to handle that. Or
Mm,
in the case of one of the examples of a 3D printed gun I've seen, it was because it was like a one-shot Derringer. You were only going to get your one shot off, right? It
I
wasn't
see.
A-
it wasn't
well,
like you have a repeating handgun with a magazine,
actually,
but
actually, that's not correct. 3D printing guns are a big thing. So Jay Stark, I think is his name,
Jason.
if I can look it up. He developed basically a Glock from a 3D printing, and I forgot I looked over the information very casually, but it is a big deal. And even like a country, I think in Africa, started printing their 3D guns, and they withstood the government because you couldn't get them, but they started printing their own. And
Nice.
I think it's Jay Stark. I'm gonna try to look it up.
see,
Yeah, I can
there's
include it in the
there's certain things
website.
like springs you're not going to be able to print.
But and then there's true, but there's also tons of manuals where you can. Yeah, Jay Stark. He 3D printed firearm. It was called the FGC, and it was called it stands for, yeah, fuck gun control, FGC 9. It was a 9 millimeter, and he ended up getting captured by the government, and then he died of a heart attack
Of
after
course.
like after like 4 days. But he was a young dude, and he printed the whole thing. So if you look into that, and you can find all the documents on how to build one online.
Okay,
There's many different.
yeah, it's a 9 millimeter carbine, isn't it?
Yep. And you
Yep.
can go look through all the stuff. So that's another thing. And it's a big community, the 3D
Yeah,
printed gun community, by the
that
way.
would simplify some. I don't know what you're using as material for your barrel. I'd be interested to
That,
find that out. You could
yep, you're right.
theoretically use a chunk of pipe, but that'd be smooth bore. It's not ideal.
Yeah,
Um,
it'd have to be,
Do you have the actual blueprint, Kurt? Could you send it to me?
I'm just looking at images of it on image search right now.
Oh, okay.
I'll try to find a blueprint later for you, okay?
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be great. And I'll look
but
too.
yeah, and actually on that note though about the 9 millimeter, if you are shopping for firearms for either shit hits the fans, sorry, uh,
Don't apologize. I love swearing.
SHF or just basic self defense stuff, common cartridges are something to look at in your area. So like if you're somewhere that's been NATO for a long time, 5.56 millimeter as the standard NATO cartridge for rifles, it's going to be a lot more prevalent and a lot easier to find ammunition for that than something that's fairly obscure like 338 Lapua or 300 Blackout is going to be like
yeah.
your local gun store is not going to be carrying the same amount of ammo for that as they are for like 5.56.
I'm gonna
The
rewatch
same,
this later. A lot
yeah,
of words are happening that
the
I'm gonna have to
same
look up.
like 9 millimeter and 45 ACP are going to be fairly common cartridges for handguns or carbines, but if you start going into things like 454 Casull and stuff like that, again, once you start getting into obscure, more exotic cartridges,
The
they're
bullet
fun
he's
for,
talking about.
yeah, the bullet you're firing. When you start getting into ammunition that's more exotic, stores are going to have less in stock. It's going to be harder to find. So it's always some. Um,
Can you repeat
as
that
well as
last
Yeah.
just
part?
the
You broke
bulk
up a bit.
price. Oh, that it's just something to be aware of, both how easy it's going to be to find ammunition for the selected firearm you're buying, and also just the price point for bullet, because you should be doing target practice. So, how much are you spending per shot to learn how to shoot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To make it easy, to make it really easy. Now, people have different ideas on this in the gun community, but just to make it easy, really simple. A 9 millimeter, get a Glock, 9 millimeter, and then an AR-15, 223. So 9 millimeter is the bullet, and then the Glock is the gun. Okay?
Okay.
9 millimeter is very popular. You can buy 9 millimeter rounds everywhere, and then get an AR-15, as Pasio calls a battle rifle, which it is. He, those are two common guns to have. That's just keep it really simple. AR-15 and a Glock 9 millimeter. Those two. One's a pistol and one's a rifle. That's it. And then you can branch from there, and there's all kinds of opinions about different rounds and stuff, but those are the two most common things to go after.
Especially in the
America.
U.S.
In the U.S., yeah.
If you were in like Africa or Eastern Europe, you might be looking for an AK.
Yes, correct. Yes. But in America, AR-15 is a gun. There's many brands that make that model. And then Glock is a brand, but it makes different models. But the G19 is probably the most common. And those two are very common guns with the ammo you can get anywhere and target practice with that. So
As well as things like replacement and aftermarket
yes,
parts. If you need,
yes.
Yeah, if you need to like replace your buffer spring or anything like that.
Yeah.
The ocean of aftermarket parts you can get
For both of those
is,
guns. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's where you start. You want to get a pistol and a rifle. Those two things, that's your base. Glock for that, and then an AR-15. No, that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
Wow. This was such a great episode. This is like conversation was great. Got some practical solutions. I feel like it's really easy to kind of get into this like sort of depression, black pill feeling, and it's really important to like focus on solutions.
Yeah, you don't need depression. You need divine masculine.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get that in our heads. You don't need depression.
Love it.
Exercise your divine masculine and live in peace. That's it. Jeez.
Oh, I'm gonna keep watching this. I'm gonna definitely rewatch this episode for myself. Yeah. Any parting words? Anybody? No.
Government is slavery?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, I mean that's it. We just get NOS, keep learning, watch Jerry's podcast, watch our content, watch my content, watch Passio's content, just get learning. We're trying to win hearts and minds. That's the key. And that's the goal. And then know how to balance your life and take charge when you need to, because we're living in a slave system. Government is slavery. And so for our freedom, we have to get out of that so we can actually evolve as a species, right?
Fucking finally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. It was good chatting.
See you in
Thanks for
class.
hosting, Jerry.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Jerry.